a recent interview we conducted on this station, really trying to tell the personal stories of those who were affected by that listeriosis crisis in 2017. We spoke to a mother who was just absolutely at her wits' end. Montla Ngobeni spoke to us on the 15th of October, explaining how she contracted listeriosis after eating some polony and other processed meats that she said she bought from a nearby shop, and there was, of course, sold from Tiger Brands. We're bringing you the latest update because, of course, that company has stepped up and they're offering to cover some of the medical bills by those affected by the listeriosis outbreak, although, of course, at this stage, they're not accepting any culpability. Let's remind you of what Montla Ngobeni said to us when we spoke to her on October the 15th.
When I was pregnant, I was craving polony all the way, polony, Vienna's Russian. So yeah, I'll drive from the house that we were staying in because it was next to Tiger Brand Enterprise Polokwane. So I'll drive and buy those ready-to-eat food and eat them, not knowing that they are contaminated. And those are the foods that caused listeriosis to my child. We were hoping for an interim assistance, maybe the medical assistance, but Tiger Brand is refusing. They are not willing to give us any medical expenses. We are doing everything on our own. That's why we ended up selling the house, because the bills were piling and we couldn't take the pressure at all.
She had to sell her home just to keep up with the medical bills. She told us how her little daughter, Tedo, was suffering as a result of having been born with listeriosis.
When Tedo was born, we were happy as a family, just like any other kid who brings joy in the family. Not knowing that 18 days later, that will be the hardest journey of our life. Because to date, Tedo has 6 operations of inserting the VP shunt in the brain. She had convulsions, she had seizures, and as a result, we ended up having so many deaths. We ended up selling the house because the money was too much for us. For now, she cannot control her bowels. Every time when she's at school, they will call me, even if I'm at work or if I'm very busy at work. The sister will be called from her class to come and assist her. And imagine kids helping each other at school. So, yeah, it's very difficult for both of them.
Are they bullied because of this, Montla?
Yes.
You can imagine the frustration, the pain, the heartache. It was, of course, the world's deadliest listeriosis outbreak at the start of 2017. More than 200 people lost their lives as a result. Now, Richard Spoor is an attorney representing many of the victims and their families in a class action suit, and we've invited him to join us this morning. And I do also want to note, we have invited Tiger Brands to join us on this conversation before, both after we spoke to Montla, but also as a result of their own announcement around covering those urgent medical bills. So far, they've declined our offer. Richard, a very good morning to you, and thank you for your time this morning. You are, of course, aware of Montla Ngobeni's case and little Tedo. It just represents one of many stories like it. And as I say, of course, 200 people lost their lives as a result of this.
Yes, it does. There are about 100 children in a similar situation to Tedo, children who were born with listeriosis and have suffered serious neurological impairments. So this little girl is not alone, and her family are not alone in what they're going through. There are a lot of children who are suffering terribly, and there are a lot of adults as well who are having a very, very difficult time.
All right, we know that, of course, there is ongoing litigation on the matter, which started, 6 years ago. Can you give us a sense of where things are and perhaps even take us to the beginning in terms of what prompted it?
Well, the case was triggered by an outbreak of listeriosis. What brought it to our attention was an outbreak of listeriosis at a creche in Soweto in 2017. The Department of Health went to the creche where all these little kids got sick. They went through the fridge. They found the Tiger Brands polonies, and that led them to the factory. And at the factory, they took numerous samples of food products and environmental samples and confirmed that these samples are genetically related to all the sickness cases, all the cases that were tested. And that really identified tiger as the source of this outbreak, which had been raging for a couple of months at the time, but where nobody knew the source of the thing. So that led to the filing of these class action proceedings. Tiger didn't oppose the certification of the action. The action is divided into two parts. One, is Tiger Brands liable for all the people who got sick as a result of eating their contaminated products? Are they liable at law? And then the second part of it is, well, who are the individuals who got sick and what are the damages that they're entitled to recover? We're still in the first stage, and it looks like we'll likely be in court with to get a ruling within the next year. But after a lot of pressure, Tiger has finally stepped forward, as you say, without a formal admission of liability, to say, look, we're willing to make an interim contribution. We recognize that there is some connection, and we're willing to contribute towards alleviating the immediate distress of some of these families.
It takes us back then to the second part, as you've just outlined, which families would be eligible and how would that be determined?
The offer is limited to people whose infection has, the bug responsible for the infection has been sequenced. So it's quite a complex story, but they take a blood sample, they culture the bacteria that's found in the blood, and then they genetically sequence the DNA of that bug. There are about 350 victims whose blood was, an isolate was taken from their blood, and it was sequenced, and we have a perfect match with the Tiger Brands bug. So there are about 350 people where we have this genetic fingerprint match between the victim and the factory and the product. There are different results of this fingerprinting. There are perfect matches, and then there are close matches. The Ngobeni, Tedo Ngobeni's match is a close match. It is subtype 6, which is the bug that was found in the factory, but it is not a perfect fingerprint. By that, I don't mean it's different. It just means that this fingerprinting process is incredibly sensitive, because we're literally taking the DNA, chopping it up into strands, multiplying it, chopping it up to strands, shining a laser beam at it, and then counting the base pairs of the DNA strand and measuring them. And not every result matches all 3 million base pairs. Some of them, you don't get the result is not as detailed as you'd like. So it's a less detailed result. And in the case of Tedo Ngobeni, it is a less detailed result, and it doesn't fall within the scope of their offer. But of course, it is an offer, it is a proposal. We have the freedom to come right back at them with a counter proposal and another offer. And to us, frankly, it's unthinkable that a child like Tedo Ngobeni should be excluded.
Because how would you even begin to explain to a little girl the complicated process you've just told us about?
Yeah, I mean, you can't explain it to a child. It's hard enough to explain to other people. The point is, she's enduring incredible distress. She had the same bug. She got it from the factory at the height of the epidemic. There is no, honestly, there is no basis to dispute where she got it from. Bear in mind, there are only about 20 of these cases per year, normally. We're talking about a period where there were 1,500 cases in a period of about 14 months. So there was a massive increase, and we know that came from Tiger brands. So if you got listeriosis during this period, the probabilities that you ate Tiger products, the probabilities that you got it from Tiger are absolutely overwhelming. Because otherwise you've only got a 20 and 60 million chance of getting it. But during this period, well over 1,000, 2,000 people plus, 1,500 with symptoms got it. People who got really sick. It all came from Tiger. I mean, it is possible that there is a remote background case that came from somewhere else during this period, from a butchery in Schweizerreinica, who knows. But that's unrelated to this big outbreak. And I think our view is certainly, and the scientists' view is certainly, that anybody within this period who consumed the product who got sick is almost certainly attributable to Tiger. So this is an offer from Tiger. It needs to be responded to. It needs to be reacted to. Some aspects of it are not acceptable, and that just needs to be made clear.
What damages in terms of an amount would you be seeking ultimately when this goes to trial?
Well, the damages need to be individuated. So there's an enormous range. I mean, we're also talking about 200 women who miscarried or had stillbirths. So there are 200 kids who died. They're not counted as deaths because they were born dead. Those mothers have gone through hell. The emotional, psychological trauma that they went through, the sense of guilt they feel. I consumed the product that made my baby sick. There are mothers who are infertile, people who went through IVF for years to conceive, went through hell, conceived twins, lost both twins, and now is so badly damaged they can never conceive again. There are many such stories. There are women who are deeply, deeply traumatized and need help. And to date, at 7 years on, they haven't been getting it. Their condition, without treatment, without support, if anything, has got worse. Tedo is a fine example. She's at the mercy of the public health system. She's had 7 shunts. Her condition hasn't been stabilized. She's deteriorated over time. As her mother said, at the end of last year, she lost bowel control. This little kid going to school suddenly can't control her bowel after another infection. The failure of Tiger to step in earlier and do something when the facts are overwhelming, they did it. They know they're responsible for this.
Richard,
it's just shocking.
Wouldn't a company like Tiger Brands, which is one of South Africa's largest food producers, wouldn't they have insurance for this kind of thing?
Oh, they do. They have insurance for this. It's an insurance company owned by Sanlam. It's a South African insurer with an English reinsurer that they also own and control. And in truth, it's the insurer that's been calling the shots. So the insurer knows that they're on the line for a lot of money. We're refining the quantification of the claims, but it's in the region of between 1.5 and 2.5 billion rand is the likely value of these claims. From the insurer's perspective, it is in their interest to delay payment because that money is invested. It's sitting in stock exchanges and markets around the world. It's growing, it's accumulating dividends and earnings. Our claims aren't increasing over time. Our claims just sit there. You've incurred medical expenses, you've incurred pain and suffering. That doesn't grow, that doesn't keep up. So from an economic perspective, it doesn't suit the insurer to pay. So an insurer has an economic interest in delaying payment as long as it possibly can, because that is the most effective and efficient way to run a business.
Can a company Can a company like Tiger Brands afford what I imagine would be reputational damage from something like this, and particularly their response to it?
Very early on the process, they abrogated their claim to their insurer, which means they handed over the claim to the insurer. And they said that up front. So we are in fact dealing not with Tiger Brands attorneys, we are dealing with the insurer's attorneys. So Tiger stood back, and their attitude is, look, it's not us. It's our insurer that's in charge and running the show. They've said this to us from the outset. But I think, the pressure has been building up. The last while, there's been a lot of media pressure and pressure from our social partners, in particular the Catholic Church, and people like Mark Haywood, who stood up and made a noise about this. He was the activist who brought this matter to our attention, got involved with the kids in the Soweto creche. And I think the pressure from our partners there is really beginning to tell. So it's led towards a decision on the part of Tiger that, look, it's about time we do something. We don't want to risk. Further loss and harm. And I think the exposure and the courage of people like Montla Ngobeni and her daughter to come forward and talk about their pain and talk about what they're going through has made a very significant difference, because people see the child, they can see what's happening. Otherwise, it's just a distant and remote thing. It's just extraordinary, the courage of Montla and her daughter to say, well, here we are. This is what has happened to us. What Montla didn't tell you is that she requires double hip replacements, because Montla, of course, was infected herself. It's how she passed it on to her child. The damage from the listeriosis, which infects your blood and spreads to all the organs, caused severe arthritic type damage to her hips. Those joints need to be replaced. She's a young woman. It'll have to be replaced again. She's going through hell. The pain that she endures from the injuries that she has suffered are on top of what is happening to her daughter, Tedo. We are talking about people who've been very, very badly injured. It's shocking. The more you hear about it, the more you deal with it, the more painful it is.
Richard Spoor, appreciate your time, the attorney representing the listeriosis victims. Meanwhile, of course, just this week, Tiger Brands reporting that it expected its earnings per share for its year to end September to rise between 11 and 13%.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongoani Bingwa.